Okay.
I had no idea I was going to make music. I was a linguist, and doing humanitarian work. But it was only once I was laid up for 5 years with disabling back pain that I went to live in a double-decker bus because I didn't have much else to do, and I thought, why not? And it was cheaper than a camper van. And basically I wanted to teach myself two things I thought I couldn't do, which was to draw and to read music. So I bought myself a semi-vintage Korg Poly 800 because I couldn't sit at that time I was laid up. So from lying down, I basically taught myself how to read music, but I got more into the manual. Korg do very good manuals. They actually talk to you about synthesis. And I got really into how does this work, and then I just got really into sounds, and then I started using a 4-track, and it just developed from that. So I think the reasons maybe there's no reason at all, who knows, but in terms of why that path into electronic music, I think one, in a way it's more accessible. You don't have to have done grade 8 whatever as a child. You can pick it up at any time, a lot easier than acoustic instruments, if you want to use acoustic instruments traditionally. And also I could beaver away on my own in my own bubble, and I could decide how I sounded. I could decide what my musical language was. And that just came from sort of circumstance and things I could get my hands on, and, guitar pedals, started playing with my voice and sampling my voice. And so in a sense, I think for me, it was a more creative and intuitive way in. When I started out using hardware only, and I've only switched to using Laptop Live for my Delia Derbyshire Day commission in 2013. Up till that point, I really liked the hardware and I liked the physicality of it. I had drum machines, I had samplers, I had effects, I had synthesizers on stage and microphone. But they got to a point where I was like, I don't really want to use these presets or even mess with these presets. I actually want to be able to create my own sounds and sculpt my own sounds before before they're being used live, if you like. So I then moved to Ableton Live and only use it as a sampler really, and live effects. I think I'm communicating authentically as possible. So I couldn't sit around a table and say, the universe is in you, you are complete. But I can put it in a song. So in a sense, it's like I can. It's my way of processing, I guess. It's my way of trying to work out, what's being human, what's it all about, all that sort of stuff. And it's also a way of sonically expressing myself. I use space a lot as well, so it's this where the sounds aren't there, always said something to me as well. The spaces between. And I guess it's a way of, it's doing it on my own terms as well, in that sense of, no one's telling me what I should sound like or, what it should sound like. I think electronic music opens you up more to those possibilities of finding your unique language, really. When I am teaching electronic music, I do 5-week courses in schools quite often. And really, they've only got 5 hours with me, and I'm working from year 3, sort of age 6, 7, up to the end of primary, and we're about to go into secondary schools. So in that sense, I think for me, it's important to use the appropriate language straight away and just explain what that is. So, for example, most of the kids know what echo is, and I don't ask them to explain what it is, I ask them to demonstrate, and they can easily demonstrate echo, co. And when it comes to reverb, they'll all go, they've not heard of that, and they think, is it to do with verbs, or, from there, they'll try and think how it relates to the words they know. But as soon as you say, has anyone sung in a bathroom with tiles before, they all go, or if they haven't, they sort of go, might have done. But straight away, and then they go, oh, is it like a tunnel? Is it like, oh, it's like our school hall? So actually, a lot of the time, it's just a case of tuning them into things that kids are generally very good at being present. So if you can help to tune them in, they'll say to you, they'll generally know all that stuff, and they'll tune into it quite quickly, and they latch onto it quite quickly. And one of the things I really like about teaching electronic music in primary schools is the way they all come out with their own interpretations of what they want to do, but also they're given a focused task, which is to create a theme for an imaginary TV programme. When we did the first Delia Derbyshire Day in January 2013, and we thought it would just sort of be a one-off really, and it was so popular and there was so much interest and demand for what we were doing, we realised that there's a bit of mileage in what we were doing. And I approached One Education Music, who used to be Manchester Music Service, and they were actually advertising for music tutors. And I asked a friend, do they do music technology? And she was like, yeah, I think there's a couple of guys who do music technology. So I went to the interview, and just got on really well with Lindsay Thomas, the head of One Education Music, and was telling her about my projects that, that I'd quite like to start doing education pilot in schools. And basically she took it on, and with John Ryland's Library we sort of came up with a partnership project to pilot teaching electronic music in schools. I think from what I see, it's empowerment. It's I find that the tools that we use, or that I've chosen to use, seem to be quite intuitive, and the kids pick them up quite quickly. So what happens is, towards the end of the 5-week course, so on the penultimate session, I'll say to them, good news, bad news. Bad news is it's our last week next week, and they'll go, ah. And then the good news is you won't need me anymore. And then some of them have actually asked to set up lunchtime clubs or after school clubs, or they've wanted to keep it going, or they'll be ambassadors or champions of teaching electronic music to other years in the school. They also, there was one boy who came in a week after the beginning of the course, and he said, "Oh, I've been on YouTube, and I've learnt this and I've learnt that, and now I can play Ed Sheeran's whatever tune it was," and and things like that, where you just see that. I think electronic music again is a way in that's playful. It's in an interface that kids can seem to be able to connect with quite easily via iPad, at the same time as they are going right back to the roots of all that tape looping, sampling, and manipulating samples. So we did our first workshop for adults at this year's Delia Derbyshire Day, DD Day 2017, at Band on the Wall, and it was subscribed. It was fully subscribed within very quickly. It sold out very quickly, and it was just great. It was great seeing adults, just get stuck in, and a lot of them, when they didn't know, we had enough assistance to show them, and then once they got it, they got it in a different way, I guess. I think it's the social impact of opening up electronic music and musical possibilities in general. Both teachers and students learn that, it doesn't have to be a guitar, and there's different ways of making music. And also it can be about your personal expression. I think it can be quite empowering to express yourself on your terms and not on the terms you feel like you should be using, or because you're taking away the formulas of how to play a guitar, how a piano should sound. I think in a way you're subverting the formulas of what you should sound like, or what music should sound like, which I find exciting. And then I think there's that idea, like once a girl put her hand up and said she wanted to be a musician when she grew up because of our course. She'd never heard of the noun musician, so the fact that she'd thought that out herself, and that had inspired her. I'm not sure her parents would think, but yeah, that was obviously having a social impact. Also had a girl saying, I didn't know the Doctor Who theme was made by a girl, maybe I could do that, and that to me is important, because it's the equal opportunities. And the fact that I work with whole classes, you've got boys and girls, not only knowing that 50 years ago there was this woman who was making possibly definitely the earliest iconic piece of electronic music in this country. There's also me doing it now, they're doing it. So again, that continuum of like, oh, okay. So when I started out, especially performing in Newcastle, it was most of the sort of local media coverage I was getting was mentioning my gender and mentioning me being the only woman or doing live electronic stuff at that time. And it did get to a point where I was like, maybe I need to check whether it's really about my music or whether it's just a novelty of me getting on stage sort of thing. So that's why I went to Berlin for a couple of years, to sort of test that out, really, because it's just no marketing point whatsoever. You're a woman out there doing stuff, because there's loads of experimental women doing stuff. So that was really good. And then when it was actually while I was in Berlin in the days of MySpace, that a very good friend, a DJ, had Delia Derbyshire as one of her top friends. And I was like, oh, who's that? Seeing this black and white photo, and then discovered her music and was just like, wow, I'm not the only one making weird and wonderful sounds. But also realising that, there's a lineage, really. That, I might be in a small percentage of professional musicians, but there's a lineage, and there's that. And then I obviously discovered Daphne and more women that were working at that time. And I guess, it's some sort of affirmation of my journey. I was already tuning into found sounds. That was really nice to think, someone else has used that as well. And there's something nice about reconnecting with that, but also completely blown away by her music, and obviously had no idea she'd made the original Doctor Who theme. So I remember being interviewed for somebody's masters when I was in Berlin with a very good and hugely talented friend of mine, Anna Sondenkin, and she was sort of saying, well, actually it's easier for us to get gigs, maybe we can charm the way into gigs, but you've got to be good when you get there. So I think ultimately you have got to be better, a bit like Delia and Daphne. Maybe you have got to make sure you're really on top of your game, especially as the sound engineer and all that sort of thing. But I like to think that ultimately you'll be respected for what you do and who you are. And, you know, some of those barriers are internal, and obviously there's societal barriers that become internal, which I think for women is generally confidence. It all comes down to confidence. And I also think that doesn't do men any favours, because they're not allowed to be unconfident in a sense. So I think in a sense you've got to be aware of those inner barriers and outer barriers and decide which ones you're going to delete, really.